He thought serving divorce papers on Christmas morning would break her. On Christmas morning in a glass-walled lodge above Aspen, Marissa Blake sat at a long breakfast table while her husband Cole Harrington slid a thick envelope toward her as his entire family watched. The snow outside looked like something from a postcard, white and clean and perfect, but inside that room, the air felt sharp enough to cut skin. When Marissa saw the word divorce printed in bold letters on the first page and heard Cole's parents clap and cheer like their son had just won a trophy, her cheeks burned hot, while the people who had eaten her food and slept in her guest rooms treated her marriage ending like a game show finale. His sisters raised their coffee mugs. His father nodded with approval. And Sienna, the young woman from the Denver office who Cole swore was just an assistant, leaned against the fireplace with a smile that said she had already won. But what none of them knew was that Marissa had spent months quietly building a digital case file filled with proof of affairs, fake charities, and money moved through shell accounts that could shatter the Harrington name from Houston to Miami. While they laughed at her that morning, she had receipts, timestamps, bank transfers, and email threads saved in 3 separate encrypted cloud folders. Have you ever been laughed at by people who were supposed to protect you, or watched someone turn your pain into entertainment? This is the story of a woman who gave up her hometown in Ohio, changed her accent for Houston high society, and still got labeled the girl from nowhere, while her husband built a secret life with another woman. Stay with this story till the end and ask yourself, in her shoes, would you walk away quietly or press a button that could bring an entire dynasty to its knees? Before we go back to where this started, drop a comment. What would you do if your partner's family cheered while they handed you divorce papers on Christmas? Would you forgive, walk, or fight? To understand why Marissa did what she did next, we need to go back years, back to Ohio, back to Dallas, and back to the first moment she felt seen by Cole Harrington. The morning started with the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls baking in the kitchen downstairs. Marissa had woken up in the guest bedroom, not the master, because Cole said his back hurt and he needed the firmer mattress, and walked down to the great room in a cream sweater and jeans. The Christmas tree stood 12 feet tall near the windows, covered in white lights and gold ornaments that Elaine had shipped in from a designer in New York. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked planned. Cole sat at the head of the long table, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His parents sat to his right in matching red pajama sets. His 2 sisters whispered to each other on the left side. And Sienna stood near the fireplace, holding a mug, her dark hair falling over one shoulder, watching Marissa like a scientist watching a lab experiment. "Merry Christmas, babe," Cole said, and slid the envelope across the table. Marissa thought it was a card at first, maybe a joke. She opened it slowly while everyone went quiet. The paper inside was thick and official. The word divorce sat at the top in capital letters, and below it were paragraphs of legal language about separation of assets and terms of dissolution. Her hand started shaking before her brain could catch up. "What is this?" she whispered. "Freedom," Cole said, leaning back in his chair. "For both of us." That's when his mother started clapping. Slow at first, then louder, and his father joined in, and then his sisters, and suddenly the whole room filled with applause like Marissa had just performed a trick. Sienna didn't clap, but she smiled, and that smile cut deeper than any of the noise. Marissa's throat closed up, her vision blurred at the edges. But instead of crying, instead of screaming, she made herself breathe. She made herself look at each face around that table. She studied the way Cole's jaw tightened, the way his mother's eyes glittered with victory, the way Sienna shifted her weight like she couldn't wait to step into Marissa's spot. And in that moment, something inside Marissa went cold and clear. Have you ever been surrounded by people and still felt completely alone? Tell me in the comments if you've ever swallowed your tears just to keep your dignity. Marissa didn't pick up the pen. She set it down on top of the papers, reached under the table for her phone, and let a tiny, controlled smile touch her lips. "If we're exchanging gifts," she said softly, "it's only fair I share mine too." Years before that Christmas, Marissa was wiping diner grease from her hands when a man in a tailored suit asked if the seat next to her was taken. She had grown up outside Columbus in a town so small that everyone knew your business before you did. Her parents worked factory jobs. She worked double shifts at a diner and a grocery store just to pay for community college classes. By the time she turned 24, she had an associate degree, a used car that needed new brakes, and a job as an assistant at a sales company that sent her to a work conference in Dallas. The hotel bar was louder than any place she had been. People in sharp suits and designer dresses stood in clusters, laughing over drinks that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Marissa sat alone at the bar in a simple black dress she bought on sale, nursing a glass of wine and trying not to feel out of place. That's when Cole Harrington sat down next to her. He was tall with dark hair that looked like it had been cut that morning, wearing a gray suit that fit him like it was made for his body alone. His smile came easy, and when he looked at her, he didn't look past her the way most men in that room did. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, even though 3 other seats sat empty along the bar. "It's yours if you want it," she said, and he sat down close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woody and clean. They talked for 2 hours. He asked about her work, her goals, her thoughts on the conference panels. He didn't talk down to her. He didn't make her feel small. And when their knees brushed under the bar, her stomach flipped in a way it hadn't in years. His fingers touched her wrist when he leaned in to hear her over the noise, and she felt heat crawl up her neck. "You're sharper than half the people in this room," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "And you don't even see it yet." By the time the bar started closing, Marissa had forgotten about her tired feet and her cheap dress and the fact that she didn't belong in a place like this. She only remembered the way Cole looked at her, like she mattered. Have you ever met someone who made you forget how tired you were in one conversation? Share where you met that person, at work, online, or by chance. When he asked for her number, his hand lingered on hers for a beat too long. "I'm flying back to Houston tomorrow," he said, "but I'm not done with this conversation yet." By the time she walked into the River Oaks townhouse, she understood one thing. This family cared more about image than warmth. Cole had flown her to Houston a month after Dallas. He paid for her ticket, picked her up from the airport in a black car, and drove her through neighborhoods where the houses looked like museums. His family's townhouse sat behind iron gates with a fountain in the driveway and windows so tall they looked like they belonged in a church. His mother, Elaine, answered the door in a pale blue dress and pearls, her blonde hair swept into a perfect twist. She smiled, but her eyes scanned Marissa from head to toe like she was checking for stains. "So you're the girl from Ohio," she said, not waiting for Marissa to answer. "Cole's told us so much." Inside, the floors were white marble. Oil paintings hung in gold frames on every wall. The furniture looked too nice to sit on. Cole's 2 sisters, Blake and Harper, stood near the kitchen in matching designer jeans, whispering to each other and glancing at Marissa like she was a stray cat someone had dragged in. Dinner was stiff and formal. Elaine asked questions that sounded polite but felt like tests. "What do your parents do? Where did you go to school? What are your career plans?" Every answer Marissa gave seemed to land wrong, and she watched Elaine's mouth tighten just slightly each time. When Marissa said, "you guys," instead of "you all," Harper corrected her with a laugh. "We say y'all down here, honey." When she reached for her water glass with the wrong hand, Blake raised an eyebrow. And when she mentioned working at a diner, Elaine said, "How charming," in a voice that meant the opposite. Cole squeezed her hand under the table and whispered, "Don't worry, they'll warm up." But Marissa wasn't sure she believed him. After dinner, Cole pressed her against the guest room door, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that felt desperate. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her close like he was trying to erase the coldness his family had left behind. She let herself melt into him, let herself believe that his love could be enough to shield her from everything else. Have you ever dated someone whose family made you feel like you didn't belong? What did you do? Stay, fight, or leave? Later that night, when the family gathered for a photo in the living room, Elaine positioned everyone in front of the fireplace. She placed Cole in the center, his sisters on either side, and his father behind them. Marissa stood off to the side, waiting. Elaine looked through the camera, adjusted the angle, and said, "Perfect." Then she took the photo without calling Marissa over. When Marissa stepped forward, confused, Elaine waved her hand. "Oh, we'll take another one when you're really part of the family." On their wedding day in a Houston chapel, everyone said she was lucky. No one asked what she might be giving up. Cole proposed 6 months after that first trip to Houston, on a beach in Galveston with a diamond ring that caught the sunset like fire. Marissa said yes because she loved him, because he made her laugh, because when it was just the two of them, the world felt right. The wedding was planned fast. Too fast, Marissa thought, but Elaine insisted that June was the only acceptable month, and the chapel had one opening. The ceremony was small and beautiful. White flowers lined the aisle. Candles flickered on every surface. Marissa wore a simple gown that made her feel like someone else, someone who belonged in a place like this. When Cole lifted her veil and kissed her, she let herself believe that this was the beginning of her real life. But 2 hours before the reception, Elaine pulled her into a side room with a lawyer and a stack of papers. "Just a formality," Elaine said, tapping a pen against the prenuptial agreement. "We updated a few clauses this morning. Nothing major." Marissa scanned the pages. The terms were stricter than what they had discussed weeks earlier. If the marriage ended in less than 5 years, she would leave with almost nothing. If she was found at fault for the divorce, she lost even more. Her hands shook as she read. "Marissa," Cole said, stepping into the room. "It's just paperwork. You trust me, right?" She wanted to say no. She wanted to call her parents and ask for advice. But everyone was waiting. The guests were already seated. The photographer was setting up. And Cole was looking at her with those eyes that once made her forget how tired she was. So she signed. The reception was held under string lights in a garden that smelled like jasmine and money. Champagne flowed. A live band played. People she had never met shook her hand and told her how lucky she was. Cole danced with her under the stars, his hand resting low on her back, whispering promises into her ear about the life they would build together. That night in their hotel suite, he undressed her slowly, kissing every inch of skin he uncovered. She let herself believe this was her new safe life, that love could be a place where she finally belonged. Would you sign a contract you weren't fully comfortable with if it meant marrying the person you loved? Be honest, yes or no. But as she lay next to him in the dark, listening to his breathing slow into sleep, she heard Elaine's voice from earlier in the day echo in her mind. "At least she looks good on his arm." And for the first time since saying yes, Marissa wondered what she had really agreed to. From the outside, their Austin home looked like success. Inside, the silence between them grew. The house sat in a gated neighborhood 20 minutes outside downtown Austin, where every lawn looked perfect and every mailbox matched. 3 bedrooms, 2 balconies, a kitchen with marble counters that Marissa had picked out herself. She hosted charity dinners there twice a month. Women in silk dresses sipping wine on the patio while their husbands talked business by the pool. Everyone told her how lucky she was. Everyone said Cole was a catch. But by their second year of marriage, Cole started working late more nights than he came home early. Business trips to Miami, client dinners in Las Vegas, weekend conferences in Denver. Marissa would wait up for him with dinner warming in the oven, and he'd walk in past midnight smelling like airport coffee and someone else's perfume. She started noticing the little things. How he checked his phone during movies. How he showered as soon as he got home instead of kissing her first. How his hand didn't reach for hers in bed anymore unless she reached first. One Thursday night, he came home just before 11. She was standing in the kitchen in an old t-shirt, cleaning up from a dinner she'd eaten alone. He walked up behind her, suddenly awake and hungry, his hands sliding around her waist. They kissed hard against the counter, his mouth tasting like whiskey, her fingers tugging at his belt. But just as his breath got heavy and his hands moved under her shirt, his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen. His whole body shifted. "Sorry, babe," he said, pulling back. "I need to take this." She stood there alone in the kitchen, her heart still racing, watching him walk into his office and close the door. Have you ever looked like you had it all on the outside while falling apart inside? Drop a comment if you've worn that mask. Later that night, while he slept, Marissa saw his phone light up on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. No name, just a heart emoji and the words, "Miss you already." She stared at that message until her eyes burned, then turned over and pretended to sleep. The first time she saw the Miami hotel charge, he told her she was overthinking things. Marissa handled the household bills. She always had. Cole said it was easier that way. He was too busy with work, and she was better with details. So when the credit card statement came through their shared email, she opened it like she did every month, scanning the charges for anything unusual. That's when she saw it. The Fontainebleau Miami Beach. 2 nights. Room service charges that added up to more than she spent on groceries in a month. A spa booking. Poolside drinks for 2. Her stomach dropped. She waited until he got home that night, the statement printed and sitting on the kitchen table. "Can you explain this?" she asked, keeping her voice calm even though her hands were shaking. Cole barely looked at the paper. "Client entertainment," he said, pouring himself a drink. "I told you about the Miami trip. You said you were staying at the Marriott downtown. Plans changed." He shrugged. The client wanted something nicer. Who orders spa services for a client meeting? His jaw tightened. "Marissa, do you really want to do this right now? I've been working 14-hour days, and you're acting like I'm some kind of criminal because I stayed in a nice hotel." "I'm not. You are." His voice got louder. "You're looking for problems that don't exist. You're turning into one of those paranoid wives who can't trust their husbands." Her face went hot. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe she was being paranoid. She thought about apologizing, but the words stuck in her throat. Later, after they'd both gone quiet, Cole came up behind her while she was loading the dishwasher. He wrapped his arms around her, his mouth soft against her neck. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I didn't mean to snap. Work's just been crazy." He turned her around, kissed her slow and deep, his hands sliding down to her hips. She let him pull her close, let him make her forget the questions she'd been asking, because in that moment it was easier to believe him than to face what the truth might mean. Have you ever had someone make you feel crazy for noticing the truth? Tell me if you've been gaslit in a relationship. But after he fell asleep that night, Marissa went back downstairs, opened her phone, and took pictures of every charge on that statement. She didn't know what she'd do with them yet. She just knew she wasn't going to forget. The subject line was harmless, follow-up from site visit, but the messages took her breath away. Marissa needed to print boarding passes for a trip to visit her parents in Ohio. Cole's laptop sat open on the desk in his home office, and hers was charging upstairs. She figured it would take 2 seconds, open the browser, pull up the airline site, print done. But when she opened his email to find the confirmation number, she saw it. An email thread with the name Sienna Marks at the top. Denver office. The preview line read, "Can't stop thinking about last night." Her finger hovered over the mouse. She knew she shouldn't open it, but her hand moved anyway. The thread went back months. Dozens of messages. Flirty jokes. Inside references to trips she thought Cole had taken alone. A message from Sienna saying, "When you kissed me in the elevator, I forgot my own name." A reply from Cole, "Same thing you did to me in that hotel room in Vegas." Marissa's vision blurred. Rain started hitting the windows outside, a soft patter that grew louder as she scrolled. There were messages about meeting up in Miami, about sneaking away during work conferences, about how Cole wished he could leave early and come back to bed. The same words he used to say to Marissa, the same tone, the same promises. She sat there for 20 minutes, reading every message, her chest so tight she thought her ribs might crack. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a whole separate life. If you found proof like this, would you confront immediately or quietly start planning your exit? Comment which one sounds more like you. Marissa didn't confront him. She didn't scream or cry or throw his laptop across the room. Instead, she opened a new browser window, logged into a cloud storage account she'd set up years ago and forgotten about, and copied every single email in that thread. Every photo, every receipt. She saved it all, closed the laptop, and went upstairs to finish packing for Ohio like nothing had happened. She didn't hire a lawyer first. She hired a tech specialist with a side hustle and no ties to the Harringtons. Marissa found Rowan through a referral from a coworker who'd once needed help securing her online accounts after a bad breakup. He worked out a small co-working space in downtown Austin, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and coffee that tasted like it cost $10 a cup. When Marissa walked in, Rowan was sitting at a corner desk surrounded by 3 monitors, his dark hair pulled into a low bun, wearing a faded band t-shirt and jeans. "You're the one who called about the data recovery?" he asked. not looking up from his screen. Yeah. Marissa sat down across from him and slid a flash drive across the desk. I need to know if there's more. He plugged it in, scanned the files, and let out a low whistle. Your husband? Yeah. And you want me to dig deeper? I want to know everything. Rowan leaned back in his chair, studying her. This kind of thing can get messy. You sure you want to see what's there? I'm sure. Over the next 3 weeks, Rowan became the only person who knew what Marissa was really doing. He showed her how to secure her own files so Cole couldn't access them. He recovered deleted messages from Cole's cloud backups. He traced credit card charges to specific locations and matched them with timestamps from Sienna's social media. And then he found something bigger. One night, as they worked late with the hum of computers filling the silence and the city lights glowing through the windows, Rowan's hand brushed hers when they both reached for the same mouse. Their eyes met. For a second, something shifted in the air between them, something warm and unexpected. But Marissa pulled her hand back, shaking her head slightly. I'm still married, she said quietly. And I'm not that woman. Rowan nodded, respectful, and turned back to the screen. Fair enough. Would you secretly gather proof before ever confronting your spouse? Or does that feel like crossing a line? Share your honest take. Then he pulled up a new window. Marissa, you need to see this. He showed her a spreadsheet. Money moving from a Harrington family charity in Houston into private accounts in Florida and Nevada. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. This isn't just an affair, Rowan said. This is fraud. The first person who called what Cole did criminal wasn't a friend. It was a stranger in a suit. Rowan gave her 2 names. A financial crimes attorney in Dallas named Victor Chun, and a compliance officer in Denver named Patricia Ruiz who had worked with companies like the Harringtons before. Marissa called them both the same day. Victor Chin's office sat on the 40th floor of a glass tower overlooking downtown Dallas. He was in his 50s, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for taking down white-collar criminals who thought they were untouchable. When Marissa showed him the files Rowan had pulled, he didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly and said, "This is federal." Federal? Marissa's voice cracked. What does that mean? It means if you move forward with this, you're not just ending a marriage. You're opening an investigation that could take down his entire family business. You ready for that? Marissa sat in the leather chair across from his desk, her hands folded tight in her lap. Outside, the Dallas skyline stretched wide and bright. She thought about every lie Cole had told her. Every time Elaine had looked at her like she was dirt. Every moment she'd felt small in a house that should have been hers too. I'm ready, she said. Patricia Ruiz confirmed the same thing from Denver. The charity was a shell. Donations were being funneled into private accounts. Cole and his father were both involved. If Marissa wanted justice, it would be loud, public, and ugly. On the flight back to Austin, Marissa leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. She remembered the first time Cole kissed her on a plane, laughing, his hand warm in hers, whispering that he couldn't wait to marry her. The memory made her chest ache, but it didn't make her second-guess what she was about to do. If exposing the truth meant taking down your spouse's whole family business, would you still do it? Why or why not? Victor Chun called her just before she landed. One more thing, he said. If you ever wanted to time this for maximum impact, when does your family gather in one place? Marissa thought about the group text she'd gotten that morning. Cole's family planning Christmas in Aspen. Everyone would be there. December 25th, she said. They'll all be together. Then, that's your moment. They wanted a perfect holiday reception. She brought a perfect memory. The annual Harrington Foundation Holiday Gala took place in December at a ballroom in River Oaks. The kind of place where chandeliers hung 3 stories high and the floor shined like glass. Women wore dresses that cost more than cars. Men wore custom suits and watches that could pay off student loans. Everyone smiled. Everyone drank champagne. And everyone wrote checks to the Harrington charity that supposedly helped at-risk youth in Houston. Marissa wore a gold dress that Elaine had picked out for her. Tight at the waist, elegant at the shoulders, expensive enough to fit the scene. Cole kept his hand on her back all night, steering her from group to group, introducing her as my beautiful wife. To anyone watching, they looked perfect, a power couple, young, successful, in love. But Marissa wasn't playing the role anymore. She was watching. She noticed which board members donated the most. She saw the digital donation screen behind the stage, numbers climbing as guests pledged 20,000 here, 50,000 there. She listened as Elaine gave a speech about transparency and community impact, words that sounded pretty but meant nothing. And she took photos, not obvious ones, just casual shots of the donation board, the guest list projected on the wall, the faces of people who thought they were funding real change. When Cole pulled her onto the dance floor, the band played something slow and romantic. His hand rested low on her back, the way it used to when they first got married. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "You look stunning tonight," he whispered. "I know things have been hard, but I love you. I promise we're going to get back to us." She wanted to believe him. Part of her, the part that remembered falling for him in that Dallas hotel bar, wanted to lean in his chest and pretend the last year hadn't happened. But all she could think about was Sienna, about the emails, about the lies he'd whispered to someone else in the same tone he was using now. "I hope so," she said, because it was easier than the truth. "Have you ever smiled for a photo with someone who had already broken your heart? Tell me how you handled that moment." Later, when Cole went to the bar to get drinks, Marissa stood near the donation screen and pulled up the files Rowan had sent her earlier that week. She cross-checked the numbers. The gala claimed $200,000 had been raised that night. But according to the shell accounts Rowan traced, less than $30,000 ever made it to actual programs. The rest vanished into private accounts tied to Cole's father and 2 other board members. She took one more photo, tucked her phone back in her purse, and rejoined Cole with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When Cole suggested Christmas in Aspen, he thought it would be his fresh start. For Marissa, it became a deadline. The family group chat started in early November. Elaine sent the first message: "Family Christmas at the Aspen Lodge this year. No excuses. Everyone will be there." Blake and Harper immediately replied with heart emojis and excited messages about ski trips and holiday pajamas. Cole texted back, "Marissa and I are in." Marissa stared at her phone. Aspen, the place where Cole's family gathered every few years to show off their wealth and take Instagram-perfect photos in the snow. The place where she'd always felt like an outsider. Then another message popped up. "Sienna will be joining us to help coordinate logistics and handle some business." Cole's father sent that one, and no one questioned it. Of course Sienna would be there. Of course the woman sleeping with Cole would share the same roof, eat at the same table, pretend to be just an assistant. Marissa didn't argue. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Sounds great," and started planning. In her bedroom one afternoon while Cole was at work, she laid out 2 suitcases on the bed. One had sweaters, snow boots, and ski gear. The other had 3 encrypted USB drives, each one loaded with copies of everything she'd gathered: emails, bank statements, photos, transaction records. She'd already sent copies to Victor Chun in Dallas and Patricia Ruiz in Denver. But she wanted backups. She wanted to be ready. Cole came up behind her while she was packing, his arms sliding around her waist. He kissed the back of her neck, soft and slow. "After this year, we deserve a little mountain magic," he said, his voice low and warm. Her body tensed, but she forced herself to relax. She couldn't let him see. She couldn't tip him off. "Yeah," she said, keeping her voice light. "It'll be nice to get away." He kissed her neck again, his hands tightening around her waist, and for a second she felt the pull, the memory of when his touch used to make her feel safe instead of sick. But then his phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled away to check it, the moment broken. "Would you still go on a big family trip if you knew your spouse was cheating and plotting against you? Yes or no?" After he left the room, Marissa reached into her coat hanging in the closet. She found the lining near the inside pocket, pulled it open just slightly, and tucked a tiny encrypted drive inside. Small enough to miss, important enough to matter. Then she zipped the coat closed and hung it back up like nothing had happened. By the time they reached Aspen, everyone had a role to play: wife, heir, mistress, queen bee. The lodge sat high above town, surrounded by pine trees and snow that looked too perfect to be real. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed wood beams, and a stone fireplace big enough to stand inside. Staff members carried designer luggage through the front door, while the family piled out of two black SUVs, laughing and taking photos in the driveway. Elaine directed everyone like a general. Blake and Harper, you're upstairs in the blue rooms. Cole and Marissa, master suite on the second floor. Sienna, you'll take the guest room near the office. She said it all with a smile, like there was nothing strange about the mistress sleeping down the hall from the wife. Marissa dragged her suitcase into the master suite and looked around. King bed with white linens. A balcony overlooking the mountains. A bathroom with heated floors. It should have felt like a dream. Instead, it felt like a trap. That night, the family gathered around the fireplace for drinks and stories. Everyone wore matching red pajamas that Elaine had ordered. Even Sienna. Marissa sat on the couch next to Cole, his arm draped casually over her shoulders, while Elaine talked about holiday traditions and Blake scrolled through her phone, showing everyone photos from last year's trip. Sienna sat in the corner chair, quiet but present. Every so often, Marissa caught her glancing at Cole. And every so often, Cole glanced back. Later, after everyone went to bed, Marissa couldn't sleep. She walked down the hallway in her slippers, heading toward the kitchen for water. As she passed Cole's office, the small room near the back where he'd set up his laptop, she heard voices. Lo, familia. A man's voice and a woman's laugh. She froze, pressed her ear close to the door. It was Cole and Sienna. You can't keep looking at me like that in front of everyone, Cole said, his tone half scolding, half amused. Then stop being so obvious, Sienna replied, her voice teasing. Marissa's stomach turned. She backed away from the door before she could hear more, her chest tight, her hands shaking. She remembered the way Cole used to laugh with her like that. Private jokes, shared secrets, the feeling that they were the only two people in the world. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like everyone knew a secret you didn't? Share what you did in that moment. Back in the master suite, Marissa didn't confront him. Instead, she pulled out her tablet connected to the lodge Wi-Fi and tested the TV system in the living room downstairs. She opened her encrypted folders remotely. Photos loaded instantly on the big screen. Spreadsheets appeared crisp and clear. Everything worked. When Christmas morning came, she'd be ready. He waited until the cameras were ready and the cocoa was poured before delivering the blow. Christmas morning started with the smell of cinnamon rolls and fresh coffee. The family gathered at the long breakfast table near the windows, sunlight bouncing off the snow outside and lighting up the room like a stage. The tree stood in the corner, covered in gold ribbons and white lights. Presents sat underneath in perfectly wrapped boxes. Everything looked like a magazine spread. Cole sat at the head of the table. Elaine and his father sat to his right. Blake and Harper whispered to each other on the left. Sienna leaned against the counter near the kitchen, holding a mug, watching. Marissa sat in the middle, wearing the cream sweater she'd packed, her hands wrapped around a mug of hot cocoa she hadn't taken a sip from yet. Before we open presents, Cole said, his voice loud enough to cut through the chatter, I have something I need to say. Everyone went quiet. Elaine smiled. His father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking pleased. Cole slid a thick envelope across the table toward Marissa. She looked down at it, confused. For half a second, she thought it might be a Christmas card. Something sentimental. An apology. Then she opened it. The word divorce jumped out at her in bold letters. Legal language filled the pages below it. Terms. Conditions. Signatures required. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hands started shaking. She looked up at Cole, and he was already pulling his hand back, his face calm, almost relieved. I think we both know this hasn't been working for a while, he said, his voice steady, practiced. I want you to know I'll make sure you're taken care of. But I need to be free to live my life honestly. That's when the applause started. Elaine clapped first, slow and deliberate, like she was at a theater performance. Then Cole's father joined in. Then Blake and Harper. The sound filled the room, hands smacking together, voices murmuring approval. Laughter bubbling up like this was all some kind of joke. Marissa felt her cheeks burn. Her vision blurred at the edges. These were the people who had eaten meals at her table, who had stayed in her guest rooms, who had smiled at her in family photos. And now they were clapping because her marriage was ending. She looked at Sienna, still standing by the counter. Sienna didn't clap, but she smiled. A small, satisfied smile that said she'd already won. Marissa's instinct was to cry, to run upstairs and lock herself in the bathroom and disappear. But something else rose up inside her instead, something cold and clear and sharp. She looked at each face around that table. She studied Cole's jaw, the way it tightened when he was nervous. She saw Elaine's glittering eyes, full of victory. She saw his father's smug nod. She saw the way Blake and Harper couldn't even look at her. And then she made her choice. For a split second, Marissa's eyes locked with Cole's, and she saw the man who once kissed her in a tiny motel room in Ohio after the Dallas conference. The man who told her she was the smartest person he'd ever met. The man who made her believe she could belong somewhere. That memory made this public cruelty cut even deeper. If your in-laws clapped while your spouse asked for divorce, what would you say out loud in that moment? Write the line you'd use. Marissa set the pen down on top of the divorce papers without signing anything. She reached under the table for her phone, pulled up her tablet, and let a tiny, controlled smile touch her lips. "If we're exchanging gifts," she said, her voice steady and calm, "it's only fair I share mine too." The first slide wiped the smile off Sienna's face. Marissa stood up from the table, tablet in hand, and walked toward the massive flat-screen TV mounted on the wall across from the breakfast table. Cole's face shifted from confident to confused. "Marissa, what are you doing?" he asked. "Sharing," she said simply, connecting her tablet to the TV with a few taps. "You wanted honesty, right? Let's all be honest." The screen lit up. The first image appeared, a photo of Cole and Sienna on a balcony in Miami, the ocean behind them, his arm around her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder. The timestamp showed a date from 6 months ago. A weekend Cole told Marissa he was at a work conference. Sienna's mug slipped from her hand. It hit the floor and shattered, hot cocoa spreading across the tile. "What the hell is this?" Elaine snapped, her voice sharp. "Evidence," Marissa said, calm as ever. She tapped the screen. Another photo appeared. Cole and Sienna in Las Vegas, standing close outside a hotel, his hand on her lower back. Another timestamp. Another weekend, he claimed he was working. Cole's confident face cracked. "Marissa, stop." "What?" She turned to look at him. "You wanted to be free. You wanted to live honestly. So let's show everyone how honest you've been." The next slide was a hotel receipt. The Fontainebleau, Miami Beach. Room service for 2. Spa bookings. All charged to the credit card Marissa had access to. Then another receipt from Las Vegas. Then one from Denver. Blake and Harper stopped whispering. Elaine's mouth opened, then closed. Cole's father leaned forward, staring at the screen. The images kept coming. Cole kissing Sienna on a rooftop in South Beach, the city lights glowing behind them. The exact same way he used to kiss Marissa in their early days, head tilted, hand on her jaw, the kind of kiss that said, "You're mine." Marissa still had photos of them kissing like that. Seeing it mirrored on the screen with another woman made her chest ache, but she didn't stop. "Turn that off," Elaine said, her voice tight. "We're just getting started," Marissa replied, tapping to the next folder. This one was labeled charity funds. "Would you expose your spouse's affair in front of their entire family or handle it in private? Tell me your approach." Cole stood up fast, his chair scraping against the floor. "Marissa, please." But it was too late. The next slide showed a spreadsheet. Donations to the Harrington Foundation listed on the left. Matching withdrawals to private shell accounts on the right. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Account names that matched Harrington family entities. Dates that lined up with board meetings and galas. Cheating was personal, Marissa said, her voice steady. But theft? That's federal. Cole's phone buzzed on the table. Everyone looked. The caller ID flashed across the screen. U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District of Texas. Cheating was personal. Theft made it federal. The room went silent except for the sound of Cole's phone buzzing on the table. Nobody moved to answer it. All eyes stayed locked on the TV screen, where Marissa's spreadsheet glowed in red and white. "Let me explain this in simple terms," Marissa said, her voice clear and steady like she was giving a presentation at work instead of destroying her husband's life. The Harrington Foundation raised over $800,000 last year. Donors thought their money was going to scholarships, after-school programs, and job training for kids in Houston. She tapped the screen. A new slide appeared showing bank transfers. But only about $200,000 actually made it to those programs. The rest, over $600,000, went into shell companies in Florida and Nevada. Companies owned by Cole's father, 2 board members, and Cole himself. Elaine's face went pale. This is a mistake. You don't understand how nonprofits work. I understand fraud, Marissa said. And so does the U.S. Attorney's Office in Houston. I sent them everything 3 weeks ago. Cole's father stood up, so fast his chair tipped backward and hit the floor. You had no right. I had every right. Marissa's eyes stayed on the screen, clicking through more slides. Account numbers, dates, withdrawals that lined up perfectly with family vacations and luxury car purchases. You want to talk about rights? Let's talk about the single mothers in Houston who donated $50 because they believed you were helping kids like theirs. Let's talk about the businesses that wrote checks thinking they were funding real programs. The numbers on the screen told the whole story. Donations in, transfers out, shell companies with names that sounded official but led straight back to Harrington bank accounts. Cole's voice dropped into a soft, pleading tone, the same voice he used to use late at night when he wanted something from her, when his hands would slide up her back and his mouth would find her neck. But this time, it wasn't desire. It was fear. Marissa, please, he whispered. We can fix this. Just turn it off and we'll talk. Please. She looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. Is emotional betrayal worse than financial betrayal? Or are they the same once trust is broken? Share your view. Cole's phone buzzed again. The caller ID lit up the table. U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District of Texas. Everyone saw it. Blake gasped. Harper's hand flew to her mouth. Elaine grabbed the edge of the table like she might fall over. Outside, the sound of car doors slamming echoed through the mountain air. By noon, the lodge wasn't just a holiday retreat. It was a crime scene in waiting. The first knock came hard and official. 3 sharp raps that cut through the chaos in the living room. Elaine rushed to the door, her red pajamas suddenly looking ridiculous instead of festive. 2 men in dark coats stood on the porch, badges already out. Behind them, 2 more cars sat in the driveway, exhaust rising in the cold air. We're looking for Cole Harrington and Thomas Harrington, one of the men said. His voice was calm but firm. We have some questions regarding financial discrepancies related to the Harrington Foundation. Cole stood frozen near the breakfast table. His father moved toward the door, his face red with anger. This is Christmas morning. You can't just show up. We can, and we are. The man stepped inside without waiting for permission. His boots left wet prints on the polished wood floor. We've been coordinating with federal investigators in Texas. We'd like to speak with both of you separately. Cole's eyes shot to Marissa. She stood near the TV, tablet still in her hand, watching everything unfold like she was behind glass. You did this, he said, his voice breaking. You set this up. You set this up, Marissa replied quietly. I just showed people what you built. Cole lunged toward her, reaching for the tablet. One of the officials stepped between them immediately, hand out. Sir, step back. That's my property. Actually, Marissa said, holding the tablet against her chest, everything on here has already been shared with my attorney, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Houston, and a compliance officer in Denver. Taking this tablet won't change anything. The room divided fast. One official took Cole into the office. Another took his father into the kitchen. Blake and Harper huddled on the couch, whispering. Sienna disappeared upstairs without a word. Elaine stood in the middle of the living room. Her perfect Christmas morning shattered into pieces she couldn't control. A third official, a woman with short gray hair and kind eyes, approached Marissa. Mrs. Harrington, we'll need a statement from you as well. Can we talk separately? Marissa nodded. They walked into the sunroom off the back of the lodge, away from the family. Through the windows, snow fell soft and steady. You're not in trouble, the woman said gently. But we need to confirm the timeline of when you discovered the financial irregularities and what steps you took. Marissa answered every question. When she found the first bank statement, when she hired Rowan, when she contacted the attorneys in Dallas and Denver. She kept her voice steady, even though her hands shook. As the official took notes, Marissa's hand rested on the arm of the chair. In the office down the hall, she could hear Cole's voice rising, then dropping. For a second, their hands almost touched through the air, a ghost of all the times they used to reach for each other before sleep, fingers tangling together in the dark like they were the only two people in the world. Would you feel guilty seeing your spouse in legal trouble if they had tried to ruin you first? Be honest. When the questions ended, the official handed Marissa a business card. We'll need you back in Houston for follow-up interviews. Probably mid-January. She circled a date on the card with a pen. This is tentative, but plan for it. Marissa took the card and tucked it into her pocket. Through the window, she watched more officials walk through the snow toward the lodge, carrying folders and laptops. Her marriage was over. Cole's empire was crumbling, and she was the one who lit the match. By New Year's, her face was everywhere, and the internet had already chosen sides. Marissa left Aspen 2 days after Christmas. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. She just packed her bags, called a car, and flew back to Austin while the investigation continued at the lodge. By the time she landed, her phone was blowing up. News outlets in Texas and Colorado had picked up the story. Charity fraud allegations rock Houston dynasty. Christmas divorce turns federal investigation. Wife exposes husband's affair and financial crimes in Aspen showdown. Her picture was everywhere. The one from the holiday gala in Houston, where she wore the gold dress and smiled next to Cole. The one from their wedding announcement in the society pages. Screenshots from her old social media accounts that she'd made private years ago. And the comments. Thousands of them. She's just a gold digger who got mad when he tried to leave. He cheated. She destroyed his whole family. Who's really the villain here? Queen. She did what she had to do. If she knew about the fraud, why didn't she report it sooner? She's just as guilty. Marissa sat in a temporary rental apartment in Austin. She couldn't go back to the house she shared with Cole and scrolled through the hate. Some people called her a hero. Some called her a snake. Some said she should have handled it privately. Some said she should have gone even harder. One night, she walked into a bar near the university to grab takeout. The TV above the bar was playing a local news segment. And there she was, walking out of the Aspen Lodge next to one of the officials, her face serious, her coat pulled tight against the cold. The anchor's voice narrated over the footage. The question remains, did Marissa Harrington wait for maximum impact, or was she simply gathering evidence to protect herself? A guy at the bar looked up at the screen, then looked at her. His eyes widened. Holy shit, you're... Marissa grabbed her food and left before he could finish. Back in her rental, she sat on the floor with her takeout box and opened her photo album on her phone. There were pictures of her and Cole from their honeymoon in Greece. Pictures of them in bed on a lazy Sunday morning, his arm around her, both of them laughing at something stupid. Pictures of them dancing in their kitchen, barefoot and happy. She couldn't delete them yet, even knowing everything he'd done. Even after everything she'd done to him, the memories still sat heavy in her chest. Have you ever been judged by people who only knew one side of your story? How'd you cope? Her phone rang. Rowan, you okay? He asked. Not really. The financial fallout is worse than we thought, he said. You need to see this. The Harrington name, once whispered with awe in Houston boardrooms, now came with warnings. The fallout moved fast. By mid-January, 3 major investors pulled funding from Harrington Enterprises. The company's credit lines were frozen pending investigation. Properties in Houston, Dallas, and Miami went under review for possible seizure. The charity board dissolved, and Cole was placed on indefinite leave from his own company. Rowan sent Marissa updates almost daily. News articles, financial filings, photos of moving trucks outside the River Oaks townhouse as Elaine packed up and relocated to a smaller property. They're liquidating assets to pay for legal defense, Rowan explained over the phone. Your ex-father-in-law is looking at serious charges. Cole might avoid prison if he cooperates, but his career is done. Marissa sat at her kitchen table in the rental, staring at a photo of the Harrington Company headquarters. The big gold sign that used to hang above the entrance was being taken down by workers in hard hats. Boxes lined the hallways visible through the windows. Everything was being packed up, shut down, dismantled. She'd set this in motion. She'd pressed the button, and now she had to live with the scale of what she'd done. One afternoon in late January, Cole texted her. "Can we meet? Just to talk. Please." She should have said no. She should have blocked his number and let the lawyers handle everything. But part of her, the part that still remembered falling for him in that Dallas hotel bar, needed to see him one more time. They met at a small restaurant outside Austin, the kind of place with dim lighting and booths in the back where nobody would recognize them. Cole was already there when she arrived, sitting alone with a glass of water he hadn't touched. He looked different, thinner, tired. His hair wasn't as perfectly styled. His shirt was wrinkled at the collar. Marissa slid into the booth across from him, and the air between them felt thick and raw. "You look good," he said quietly. She didn't respond. "I know you hate me," he continued. "I know I deserve it. But I need you to understand, I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you?" He looked down at his hands. "I don't know. I got caught up in everything. The pressure from my family, the business, the expectations. Sienna made me feel, I don't know, free." Marissa's chest tightened. For a second, just a second, she hated that she still noticed the way his shirt fit his shoulders. The way his voice dropped when he was being honest. The way her body remembered what it felt like to be close to him, even though her mind knew better. Can you still feel attraction towards someone you no longer respect? Be real in the comments. "You didn't just hurt me," Cole said, leaning forward. "You hurt yourself too." He slid a document across the table. "My lawyers are filing countersuits. Defamation. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. They're going to argue that you waited until Christmas to maximize damage, that you humiliated me in front of my family for revenge, not justice." Marissa picked up the document and scanned the first page. Her hands didn't shake. "Let them try. They'll drag your past through the mud. Marissa, your family, your finances before we met. Everything. Good," she said, pushing the paper back toward him. "Let everyone see where I came from and how far I got without your family's money." She stood up. "You're right about one thing. I did wait. I waited until I had everything I needed to make sure you couldn't lie your way out of it. And I'd do it again." She walked out of the restaurant and didn't look back. Elaine Harrington had never begged anyone in her life until now. The meeting happened in a sleek conference room in a Dallas law office, 40 floors up with the city skyline spread out beyond the glass like a game board. Marissa sat on one side of the table with her attorney. Elaine sat on the other with two lawyers in expensive suits. Elaine looked smaller than Marissa remembered. Still polished. Hair perfect, jewelry tasteful. But her eyes had dark circles no amount of makeup could hide. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Elaine said, her voice tight and controlled. Marissa said nothing. One of Elaine's lawyers slid a folder across the table. "We're prepared to offer settlement. A lump sum payment of $2 million in exchange for you softening your public statements, agreeing not to participate in further media coverage, and signing a non-disclosure agreement regarding family matters." Marissa opened the folder. The number sat there in black and white. $2 million. More money than she'd ever dreamed of having when she was working double shifts in Ohio. "And if I refuse?" she asked. Elaine leaned forward. "Then we'll make sure everyone knows about your past. The debts. The eviction your parents faced. The DUI your brother got. We'll make you look like an opportunist who married Cole for money and then destroyed him when he tried to leave." Marissa looked at Elaine, really looked at her. This woman who had made her feel small for years. Who had forgotten to include her in family photos. Who had clapped when Cole handed her divorce papers on Christmas morning. And suddenly Marissa saw it. Elaine wasn't powerful. She was desperate. As Elaine kept talking, threatening to drag Marissa through the press, Marissa's mind drifted. She remembered the night early in her marriage when she and Cole had snuck into this same building after hours. He'd had a late meeting, and she'd met him there. They'd kissed in the stairwell like teenagers, laughing and breathless, his hands in her hair, her back pressed against the cold concrete wall. She'd felt alive that night. She felt like she belonged. That memory felt like it belonged to someone else now. Would you take a big payout to keep quiet or stand on principle even if it cost you? Share your choice. Marissa closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. "Keep your money," she said, her voice calm and steady. I'll see you in court. Elaine's face went white. You're making a mistake. No, Marissa said, standing up. The mistake was thinking you could buy my silence the same way you bought everything else. She walked out of that conference room with nothing but her dignity and the truth. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The mistress walked into the cafe, shaking, not from guilt but from fear. The coffee shop in Denver sat on a quiet street corner with windows fogged up from a cold. Snow boots lined the entrance, dripping onto rubber mats. Marissa arrived first, ordering a black coffee and taking a table in the back where nobody would notice them. When Sienna walked in, she looked nothing like the confident woman who'd stood in the Aspen lodge, smiling, while Cole handed over divorce papers. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. No muck-up. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped her scarf. She sat down across from Marissa without ordering anything. "Thanks for meeting me," Sienna said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marissa didn't respond. She just waited. "I know you have every reason to hate me," Sienna continued. "I'm not here to apologize or make excuses. I'm here because they lied to me too." "Who lied?" "Cole. His father. All of them." Sienna's eyes filled with tears. "They told me Cole was already separated from you. They said you knew about us and didn't care. They promised me protection if the business stuff ever came out." Marissa took a sip of her coffee. "And now they're throwing me under a bus." Sienna pulled out her phone and showed Marissa a text from Cole's father. "You were never an employee. You were an independent contractor. We have no obligation to you. They're cutting me loose. My name is in all the federal paperwork, but they're saying I acted alone, that I falsified contracts without their knowledge." For a second, Marissa felt a twist of satisfaction. But then she looked closer at Sienna, really looked at her, and saw something familiar. The same look she'd had when Elaine insulted her at family dinners. The same fear she'd felt when Cole made her doubt her own reality. Sienna wasn't just the other woman. She was another pawn in the Harrington game. "What do you want from me?" Marissa asked. "I want to tell the truth," Sienna said. "I have emails. Files Cole asked me to delete from his office computer. I backed everything up before they could wipe it." Sienna described how Cole had pursued her, how he'd used the same flattering words he once used on Marissa, calling her smart, telling her she deserved better, making her feel special. Hearing those lines repeated made Marissa's skin crawl with recognition. He'd had a script, and both of them had fallen for it. Could you ever work with the person your partner cheated with if it meant getting justice? Why or why not? Sienna reached in her bag and pulled out a flash drive. She slid it across the table. "This is everything I backed up from his office computer. Deleted emails. Financial records he thought were gone. Proof that his father knew about the shell accounts from the beginning." Marissa stared at the flash drive. Taking it meant aligning with the woman who'd slept with her husband. It meant choosing justice over pride. She picked it up and tucked it in her coat pocket. "I'll make sure this gets to the right people." Sienna exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. "Thank you." As Marissa left the cafe, snow falling soft around her, she realized something. Cole hadn't just broken her heart. He'd broken everyone he touched, and now his lies were finally catching up to him. Justice didn't look like a movie scene. It looked like paperwork, long hearings, and one final decision from a tired judge. The legal process dragged through winter and into early spring. Court appearances in Houston, depositions in Dallas, federal investigators combing through every transaction the Harrington Foundation had ever made. Marissa showed up to every hearing. She sat in courtrooms with fluorescent lights and hard wooden benches, listening to lawyers argue over clauses and precedents. She answered questions under oath. She handed over evidence. She watched Cole and his father sit at the defense table, their expensive suits looking less impressive every time. In March, Cole's father took a plea deal. 5 years for fraud and embezzlement, with possibility of parole after 3. The company would be restructured. Assets would be liquidated to pay restitution to donors and fund real charitable programs. Cole's case went differently. With Sienna's files and Marissa's evidence, prosecutors had enough to charge him with fraud, but his lawyers negotiated hard. In exchange for full cooperation and testimony against other board members, Cole received 2 years in a minimum security facility and 10 years probation. He'd lose his business licenses. He'd never work in finance again. The divorce settlement came through in April. Because of the prenup and Cole's fraud conviction, Marissa received significant restitution, not from the charity funds, but from Cole's personal assets. Enough to start over. Enough to build something real. The settlement also included funding for a trust that would support legitimate programs for at-risk youth in Houston, the kind of foundation had promised but never delivered. On the day of sentencing, Marissa sat in the back of the courtroom. Cole stood before the judge in a plain gray suit, his hands clasped in front of him. The judge read the sentence, 2 years, restitution, probation, and asked if he had anything to say. Cole turned slightly, his eyes scanning the courtroom until they found Marissa. For 1 second, their gazes locked. 1,000 memories flashed between them in that single stare. The Dallas hotel bar, their wedding day, Christmas mornings before everything fell apart, late nights in bed when the world felt small and safe. Then the bailiff stepped forward and Cole was led away. Is legal justice enough after emotional betrayal? Or does the heart need something more to truly move on? Comment your view. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters shouted questions at Marissa. She walked past them with her head high, her attorney beside her, saying nothing. When she reached her car, her attorney handed her a folder. With what you've secured, you could go anywhere and start anything. What do you want your life to look like now? Marissa sat in her car for a long time, staring at that question. For the first time in years, Marissa woke up without security gates outside, just a small apartment and a key that was hers alone. The new place sat in a quiet neighborhood in central Austin, nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a balcony barely big enough for a chair and a plant. But it was hers. Every piece of furniture she'd chosen herself. No marble floors. No oil paintings picked out by someone else's decorator. Just secondhand finds from local shops and a couch she'd assembled with a screwdriver and stubbornness. Sunlight came through the windows in the morning and hit the potted plants lined up on the sill. Marissa made her own coffee. She ate breakfast at a small table without worrying about who was watching or what they'd think. She called her parents in Ohio for the first time in months. Her mother cried on the phone. Her father asked if she needed anything. "I'm okay," Marissa told them, and for the first time in a long time, she meant it. She reconnected with old friends from her hometown, people who knew her before the Harrington name, before the designer dresses and charity galas. They met for coffee and talked about normal things. Work, movies, plans for the weekend. Nobody asked about the trial unless she brought up first. One evening, Rowan came over to help her set up a secure home network. He'd been checking in on her throughout the whole legal process, never pushing, just present when she needed someone who understood the technical side of everything she'd been through. They sat on the floor of her living room with Chinese takeout spread between them, laptops open, cables tangled everywhere. His knee touched hers as they reached for the same spring roll, and they both laughed. "You're really good at this whole starting over thing," Rowan said, wiping sauce from his chin. "I don't know about that," Marissa replied. "Some days I wake up and can't believe any of it was real." "It was real, but it's also over." He looked at her, his expression soft. "You get to write what comes next." Their eyes held for a beat longer than necessary. Marissa felt her heartbeat change, not the frantic, anxious rhythm she'd had around Cole toward the end, but something steadier, something that felt like possibility instead of pressure. Have you ever started over from scratch after a breakup or divorce? What was the first thing you changed? Later, as Rowan packed up his gear to leave, he paused at the door. Have you thought about starting a foundation? You already know more about those than most people, and you know exactly what not to do. Marissa stood there after he left, that question sitting in her chest like a seed waiting to grow. The woman once used as a prop at charity galas now ran her own. By summer, Marissa had filed paperwork for a nonprofit called Second Star Foundation. The mission was simple: help women trapped in financial abuse get the resources they needed to leave safely. Legal aid, financial planning, tech security, all the things she'd had to figure out on her own. She met with advisors at a community center in Austin, the kind of place with folding chairs and whiteboards covered in brainstorming notes. No cristals chandeliers. No champagne. Just people who actually cared about making a difference. The media slowly started to shift its narrative. Articles that once called her a scorned wife now called her a whistleblower. Opinion pieces debated whether she'd been right to expose the fraud so publicly, but more people were listening to her side. She gave one interview, just one, to a local reporter who'd been fair in her coverage. They sat in a park, and Marissa talked about what it felt like to be gaslit, to watch charity money get stolen, to choose truth over comfort. "I'm not a hero," Marissa said into the camera. "I'm just someone who got tired of being quiet." The interview went viral. Donations started coming in to Second Star Foundation. Small amounts from people who'd been through similar situations. $50, $100, some just $20. Every dollar mattered because it came from belief, not obligation. One afternoon after a planning session, Rowan hugged Marissa goodbye. But this time, the hug lasted a little too long. His arms stayed around her. Her head rested against his chest. When they pulled apart, neither of them looked away. "Dinner sometime?" he asked. "Not work-related. Just dinner." Marissa smiled. "Yeah, I'd like that." She realized her heartbeat had changed around him. Not the desperate need she'd felt with Cole. The fear that if she didn't hold tight enough, he'd slip away. This felt different. Calmer. Like she could breathe and still be seen. If you could start a project to fix one problem you've lived through, what would it be? Share your cause. That evening, an email popped up on her phone from an Aspen real estate agent. Subject line, "Property you might be interested in." She opened it. A small cabin had just hit the market near the lodge where her marriage had ended. Modest. Quiet. A place with a view of the mountains and a porch built for one chair and a mug of cocoa. Marissa stared at the listing for a long time. Then she called the agent and scheduled a tour. 1 year after the Christmas divorce, she walked back into Colorado on her own terms. The flight to Aspen felt different this time. No family waiting at the lodge. No suitcases full of lies. Just Marissa with a carry-on bag and a reservation at a small hotel in town. The cabin sat 20 minutes outside the main area, tucked into the trees with a narrow driveway that hadn't been plowed yet. The real estate agent met her there with keys and paperwork. Inside, the cabin smelled like pine and dust. 1 bedroom, a kitchen with butcher block counters, a stone fireplace smaller than the one at the lodge, but big enough to matter. The back porch overlooked a valley where snow fell soft and constant, covering everything in white. Marissa stood on that porch, her breath visible in the cold air, and felt the weight of memory press against her chest. A year ago, she'd been in a lodge a few miles from here, surrounded by people who hated her, holding a tablet full of proof while her marriage exploded in front of her. Now she stood alone. No cole, no elaine, no applause or cruelty, just the quiet and the snow and the choice to reclaim a place that had tried to break her. "I'll take it," she told the agent. The paperwork took an hour. When Marissa signed the final page, her phone buzzed. A message from the state correctional facility. "Cole Harrington has requested a supervised meeting before beginning his sentence. If you wish to participate, please respond within 48 hours. Marissa stared at the message. She could ignore it. She could let him start his sentence without closure. But part of her, the part that still remembered who they used to be, needed to see him one last time. Not for him, for herself. She called Rowan from the porch, her voice echoing across the valley. "How are you?" he asked. "I bought a cabin in Aspen." He laughed. "Of course you did. I miss you," she said, the words coming easier than she expected. His voice dropped, warm and certain. "I miss you too." They talked for an hour, about the foundation, about the cabin, about plans for when she got back to Austin. When they finally hung up, Marissa felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Would you ever go back to the place where your worst heartbreak happened, just to prove to yourself that it no longer owns you? The next morning, she sent her response to the correctional facility. "I'll be there." He didn't leave her life because he stopped loving her. He left because she finally loved herself more. The meeting room was small and cold, with a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs across from each other. A guard stood by the door. A pane of reinforced glass separated the waiting area from where Cole would enter. Marissa sat down, her hands folded on the table. She'd worn jeans and a simple sweater. No jewelry, no makeup beyond what made her feel like herself. She didn't need to prove anything today. When Cole walked in, he looked older, thinner. His prison jumpsuit hung loose on his frame. His hair had grown out, no longer perfectly styled. He sat down slowly, his cuffed hands resting on the table. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I almost didn't." They sat in silence for a moment. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. "I've had a lot of time to think," Cole said. "About what I did. About how I treated you. About all the lies." He looked down at his hands. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not because I got caught. Because I hurt you." Marissa studied his face. No charm. No manipulation. Just exhaustion and regret. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Why not just leave if you were unhappy?" "Because leaving would have meant admitting failure," he said. "To my family. To myself. It was easier to lie than to face the truth." "And Sienna?" He flinched. "She made me feel like I was someone other than my father's son or my mother's project. But I know now that I was just running for myself. And I dragged you both down with me." Marissa felt an echo in her body when he said, "There was a time when I only wanted you." For a second, she remembered the way his hands used to trace her spine in the dark, the way he'd whispered her name like it was the only word that mattered. But the pull faded under the weight of everything he'd done, and she realized she didn't want him back. She just wanted peace. "I hope you figure out who you are in there," Marissa said. "I hope you come out better." "What about you?" Cole asked. "What's next?" "I'm building something real. Something that actually helps people." She smiled slightly. "I bought a cabin in Aspen." His eyebrows lifted. "Seriously?" "Seriously. I'm not letting that place define me anymore." The guard signaled that time was almost up. Cole stood, his chains rattling. "For what it's worth, you were always stronger than I deserved." Marissa stood too. "Goodbye, Cole." "Goodbye, Marissa." She walked out of that facility and didn't look back. On the next Christmas morning, Marissa woke up in her Aspen cabin. No family drama. No divorce papers. No lies hiding under perfectly wrapped boxes. She made her own coffee in the small kitchen, watching snow fall outside the window. Rowan had flown in the night before, and he was still asleep in the guest room down the hall, keeping things slow, giving her space, but choosing to be there. Later, a few people she'd invited would arrive. Her parents, a couple of friends from the foundation, Rowan, a small group of people who chose her not because of her last name, but because of who she was. She carried her mug onto the porch and sat in the single chair she'd bought just for this spot. The mountains stretched wide and quiet in front of her, covered in white. No one could hand her a paper and tell her what her life was worth. Not anymore. If you had the chance to confront the person who broke you in front of everyone, what would be the one line you'd say to them? Marissa smiled at the quiet, brewed her own coffee, and let herself finally believe that this time, this life she was building, was hers alone. If Marissa's story hits something in you, like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, would you have done what she did or chosen a different kind of revenge? The end.